Welcome, everyone, to episode 2 of the Smokepit Symposium podcast with your host, me, Hess, and my co-host, Rice. Today's episode, we got our buddy Delong as our guest. Today's topic primarily will focus on Russia and Ukraine and that conflict. All right. Rice, you want to give a bit of an intro from your side?
Are we live?
We are live.
Are we connected?
Yes, everything is set.
Fantastic. Welcome, one and all. Anybody who is out there actually listening to this and would like to hear the difference of opinions and maybe some current events that you're not able to with the current media outlets. For those of you who don't know me, you can just call me Rice. That's what everybody knows me as. I'm not going to go along with any other aliases because most of the people that we're going to choose to come on here will know me as such. It'll be a lot easier for communication-wise.
All right.
Today, for our small cast that we have along with us one of our compatriots or colleagues that we served alongside in Afghanistan with. Delong, would you like to introduce yourself?
Just a quick background. Served 5 years in the Army Infantry, did 5 years contracting, served 2 tours in Iraq while in the Army, went to NAU, got a bachelor's in political sciences, and just glad to be on your show.
Glad to have you.
Oh, of course, man. We're going to be having not only you, but many of our other brethren on to share opinions, and hopefully one day when we can actually have cams and microphones and recording devices and possibly even our own small studio, we'll be able to have everybody on.
A studio would be awesome.
It would be, and it is a goal. I'm just saying, man.
It is.
We start up our company, make a little bit of money, slit some throats. You never know what we might find.
Yeah. Kind of set it up. Not exactly like Timcast, but
yeah,
have that ability to have drinks and everything too.
Yeah, have the ability to smoke and joke, just like we were back at the Cigar Shack, back in Scorpion, and just shoot in the breeze and be a safe, quote unquote, environment for veterans like us to come and air out and vent without judgment. And along the way, answer some questions that the internet might have. But back to our previous topic that we were actually on, which you brought up, was about the mindset of the current American military and about how the movements of Russia are because we are distracted at the moment.
I actually do have a bit of a unique insight into kind of a bit of that. So I was hanging out with a recruiter a while ago, and he was talking to a potential recruit, and they asked him what his ACT score was because the kid hadn't taken his ASVAB yet.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly the score, but it was either a 19 or a 21.
Yeah, dang, killer, you're a fucking genius. Sign here.
And well, the recruiter responded, "Well, that's a fairly average score. You'll do fine." And I looked at him and go, "Wait, what?" I was like, "My average was back when I took it was 28."
Mine was, I think, 23. God, it's been forever.
Maybe I don't want to assume anything, but maybe I scored a bit higher. But I thought back around our time, the average was a bit higher. But the recruiter even kind of looked at me and went, "Yeah, the quality's gone down."
I wouldn't say so. It's hard to put a word like that on it, the quality of it, because if you look at the American education system,
Educate.
I'm from Kentucky, all right, man. As much as I want to say that it is the fault of the education system, to a point, it also is a fault, in my opinion, with parents as well, to understand and watch their kids, to see what they're learning, and to kind of help filter that.
And to also supplement the teaching.
Yeah.
Like, not that you have to sit down and spend 4 hours a day teaching them math or anything, but
Yeah, no, nothing like that. But just to kind of like get a general sense of what
being
they're learning
yeah, be
and
involved,
actually,
answer
yeah,
their
being
questions.
involved.
Like if your kid comes up to you and be like, "Hey, mom, hey, dad, what's how do I solve this math problem?" Don't be like, "Go look it up." Sit down and actually help them.
Yeah, because probably more than likely, from what I'm noticing, especially with the new generations that I'm having to work with at my job and previous jobs that I've been working at here back home, has been most of the new generation is more of like a fill in the blank kind of generation, where they'll fill in the blank, pass it along, and not really comprehend anything. They'll just move on to the next thing. Wherein my generation was the start of the No Child Left Behind, but the state governments were also fighting that. And from what I remember is that when you answered something, you always had to provide an explanation. If your explanation was completely off the fucking reservoir, it'd be marked wrong, and they would explain why. You'd have to retake the test.
Yeah, like I remember for me, like with math tests, it was always show your work so that if you're as long as you showed your work, I can give you partial credit to see what you're thinking, and I can
Right.
at least then correct you where you go wrong.
So, DeLong, in your honest opinion, with the idea that Russia and China, at this given moment, since they have the spotlight, uh, what would our opinion or our topic is basically that they are making these movements because they know that America as well as the UN are currently distracted with other topics and other, we'll say, fronts of battle. Would you agree that they are making these moves because they see it as kind of like a open season?
I mean, my personal opinion on it is I believe it's a distraction from the failed COVID agenda that they had. I don't know how far you guys have researched into it, but have you checked out the what the World Economic Forum has been pushing recently?
Hasn't that been what was it, the past couple of years now, right? Since 2000, late 2018.
Yeah, they've been pushing what's called the Great Reset with Klaus Schwab,
Mhm.
and if you actually listen to some of his interviews or some of his postings, it's kind of a huge plan they have for global governments, etc. Now, with that, the whole push for, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's called, one of the common phrases they used was, you will own nothing and be happy. Now, they were saying how the COVID would help push their agenda. It's called Agenda 21 in the World Economic Forum, and it's it's actually pretty scary on their plans. Now, I think because they got a lot of pushback from COVID, that the media is covering the Ukraine issue a lot more now to kind of distract us from the last 2 years, how they've socially conditioned us, how they've pushed the vaccines and the mask mandates, and a lot of that's been falling apart as they've seen, especially in like Canada, for example, with Trudeau, who's part of the young global leaders alumni under Klaus Schwab, and they see that the world's kind of getting fed up with it, so they kind of need a distraction, and they do this quite often in the media. I remember when Crimea was being overtaken by the Russians, being annexed by the Russians, that it was all in the news how we're going to go to war with Russia, how scare tactic. Everyone got up in arms about it, and when it kind of got a little too serious, they just started posting about Miley Cyrus twerking, and it's almost like the people, the vast majority globally, just forget about the events after a week or two. And I kind of see that right now with COVID, where everyone's up in arms with Ukraine and Russia, but it's like they've kind of forgotten what's happened to us and all the things that have they pushed on us, closing down businesses, huge inflation, everything else, and this is just a major distraction to kind of like make people forget about the last 2 years.
No, yeah, I fully agree with that, and it does absolutely make sense. I have seen you make a couple posts about it on one of your 20 Facebook accounts, and I've been trying to keep up with that, and it is some real shit because one of the main things that people are starting to realize, all these quote unquote conspiracy theories, these crazy ideas, hell, even the old talks of Alex Jones talking about the globalists, it's actually coming to fruition. And it is kind of it's kind of an off feeling, or I would say an unsettling feeling, knowing that there are these many higher powers that are trying to push this agenda. And even though people are fighting back actively, it does make you wonder to what end are there control, are there contingencies for this? To what extent are they willing to go to make everyone comply? Because obviously, Putin putting on a big show, threatening to, completely take out Chernobyl, to completely erupt, destroy the last few reactors and ruin pretty much the entire European, Asia, North African front of radiation, that entire sector of the world. We all know he's obviously not going to do that shit. It does bring up the question of why are they putting up such a big fuss and putting up such a big distraction? And that is solid reasoning that there is many things that have been brought to light that they want us to forget, i.e. the Ghislaine Maxwell trial that is still actively going on right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. We're trying to distract the populace on what's going on and what people have been tracking. The only thing is, I'm kind of concerned because with the World Economic Forum actually posting this stuff publicly, anyone that can see will see, could see, I should say, but a lot of them choose not to, and that's why when I think it was when I forget the doctor, Dr. Malone started mentioning mass psychosis, they tried to shut him down real quick because people, when they're in that, statistically, 30% of people will believe in their narrative, 40% of the people will stay neutral, undecided, don't really care, whatnot, until it truly affects them, and then they'll choose a side. And the other 30% are aware of what's going on and trying to fight against it. And it's a battle almost for that mid-tier of people who are paying attention to actually either A, allow the mass psychosis to continue, or B, have it eventually fought against. I believe people over time have fought against it, and that's where you get the trucker convoys, that's where you get a lot of these protests that go unseen in the media.
Right. Right. What do you say, Hess?
Well, it's definitely interesting because there's a lot of disinformation going on in regards to this and just everything. Because I forgot, it was in the past couple of days, but I had heard that the World Economic Forum had been deleting a bunch of things off of their website. And I even just looked up their website. They still have a whole page dedicated to the Great Reset, but it's like 3 paragraphs in total.
Well, what's kind of interesting on that is Klaus Schwab recently spoke of the power he has in all the governments, and of the names he mentioned, besides Trudeau, Merkel, he also said Putin. And with that, it's kind of how Putin is in favor of his agenda. And when, not only that, but when he was saying how he was able to penetrate a lot of the governments, they took it up to the Canadian Parliament, one of the representatives spoke out against it and wanted a list of names of all the personnel in it. When he asked that question, he started name dropping people who were part of the Young Global Leaders, etc. They cut him off, and one of the other representatives in their parliament started claiming it was disinformation and the audio was inaudible. But reviewing the actual video, it's clear. It couldn't be more clear on what he said and how he said it.
I find it weird that Putin would be a part of it.
So, I don't find it that surprising, to be dead honest. Especially with Putin being this late in his years. What more does he have to lose?
Well, just his mentality, though. I feel like Putin might be doing it, if he is in fact a part of it, he's either doing it because he sees an opportunity for himself to catapult through it, or
I mean, 100%. The guy's very crafty. I mean, he knows politics better than most. I mean, the guy used to be part of the KGB, so I could totally see him, playing devil's advocate or double agent, quote unquote, in it, and just being a part of it to have the appearance when he's going to do what he wants to do.
Yeah, because there was a good video I watched last week about a potential reason why Russia would invade Ukraine, other than the fact that if you study Putin since the 90s, he's said how he wants to return Russia to the Soviet Union era, to the Russian Empire days of power. But the video talks about how if he can take control of Ukraine, it pushes NATO's borders to them to a very small gap, basically less than 2/3 of Poland's borders for the Great Eurasian Plain.
Yeah.
Which, if the more he can narrow that gap, the less of a threat NATO becomes to him, because there's not as much land that they can spread out over.
Well, I mean, so the reason why Putin, I think, wants Ukraine more than anything else is because, well, one, we all know that Russia's oil is they're the number one exporter to Europe, and you have the Russian pipeline, etc.
Yeah.
But the oil reserves in Ukraine are huge. I mean, they have so many oil reserves, and to tap that, it's basically a gold mine.
Yeah.
So he's using the claim of Ukrainians pretty much being Russian, which is partially true. If you have the east of the river, I apologize, I can't remember the name of the river.
The Dnieper.
Yeah, the east of that is actually ethnic Russians from the Rus. Historically, it is. They speak Russian, and that's where you have a lot of the pro-Russian supporters on. And the reason why he annexed it in the first place is mainly because of the port. He wants control of that for trade and everything else.
Plus, it's the only non-ice port that they would control then.
Yeah, and if he gaining the rest of the Ukraine, though, he kind of has that territory more so, as well as its reserves. So for him, using Ukraine's technically Russian is a half-truth, where yes, half of it is Russian. And I believe that the only acceptable terms, and many people probably disagree with this, but I think east of the river should be annexed to Russia, and the rest of Ukraine should stay autonomous.
Yeah, the video also kind of covered that, where by controlling the Crimea and the water area that around Ukraine, if they could tap into the oil reserves there, they would, say Ukraine tapped into them, Ukraine would instantly be jumped to number 5 in oil reserve capacity. Which is...
The question is, though, of transport. If they were to tap into it, where would they be able to export it out without being harassed by the Russians?
Straight to Europe.
Just straight hard line across Romania into Europe.
Or through Poland. Yeah.
which would just strengthen their ties with NATO countries and the EU and everything else. And that's Russia would be losing a lot there. They'd lose a lot of their economy. They'd lose control over those regions. There's just too much at stake for them. So that's why Putin would actually want to push into Ukraine and take it.
Well, not only to mention the wheat control.
It honestly feels like this may be like one of the last vestiges of like oil reserves on that side, since most of your independent vehicle companies are starting to switch over, or attempting to. Actually, I wouldn't even say attempting to, they're trying to, but they are switching over to electrical, or hell, even nuclear at this point. So it brings into a lot of question of, once they have Ukraine, what is the next step? To what end is this? To boost their own economy? To make us more reliant on them? How does this help fuel the new world order, or the new quote unquote Illuminati, so to speak?
With the shift to more like renewable energy sources and everything, I would almost argue that the oil and the fuel aspect is a minimal factor. I would almost say that the wheat control of controlling Ukraine and Russia, thus having 1/3 of the wheat production in the world, that would be that's a bigger factor for controlling Russia's economy and just Russia's influence in the world.
Like, Ukraine is definitely a land grab of numerous resources, especially rare ores and metals. I mean, God, the land itself is surprisingly untouched, like amazingly, like untapped into it. But once Russia moves in, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm at a little bit of back burp here. Once Russia moves in, they're going to strip mine and suck and drive everything it's got.
Yeah.
Man, lots of moving pieces, but it's just wondering where to start. Like, where do you look at it? Like, if this is a giant machine that is moving and controlling itself out of our control, which small part or small cog do you guys think is an avenue that we could focus on? Something that could potentially help the cause of those who are against the grand reset.
Well, I don't even think Putin thinks he can actually control the entirety of Ukraine, because he will have guerrilla fighters from now till at least another 30 years, because they will fight back. I mean, they're not ethnic Russians. The Western Ukrainians are not ethnic Russians. They're going to absolutely hate Putin and his regime, so they will fight back. I can't believe it's spacing me, but what's the group that's currently fighting against the Russians right now?
The Americans?
No. So Russia took over.
There's several dozens.
Chechens, that's it. The Chechens.
The Chechens are back.
Yeah, because they've been fighting with them, and they're going to have it 10 times worse. And I think that's also the end game for our governments and many others, and that's why they're being armed right now, is because they know there will be an insurgency continually against Russia from now until either A, Russia's government collapses, or B, they gain autonomy.
This is pretty much a pseudo Afghanistan for Russia. That basically these new wars, these new conflicts that are coming, is starting to show that conventional warfare will never work ever again. That ever since Russia first invaded Afghanistan against the Mujahideen, that's kind of where, or no, I would even say go before that. When America invaded and went against Vietnam, conventional warfare pretty much went out the window there, where no matter how much you beat back the opposition, there will always be somebody. That there's never a set in stone, clear victory moving on. There's never anything like that, because, oh man, I'm spacing on words here, fellas, but you guys know where I'm going with this. That basically the world is now watching Russia going through this, which is interesting because Russia's not even putting forward its most elite troops. It's putting forward like its weakest. Like, this reminds me of McNamara's morons. during Vietnam, where they would send autistic, mentally handicapped draftees into combat to just get rid of them, just to kill them. And in a weird way, Putin's kind of, from what I've been seeing on the news, especially with TikTok, like, don't get me wrong, the social media I think is stupid, but it's very useful to information gathering, especially getting away from, CNN or a communist news network. They're sending in a lot of their weakest units. They're not sending out their best tanks. They're not sending out their best jets, their best helicopters. They're holding a lot back in reserve.
Well, I think a lot of it is propaganda. First off, I don't think the Russian military or the Russian country itself has been as strong as they try and present themselves. I know I forget the quote it comes from, but they say the first thing that goes out the window in war is truth, and you see both sides. You see both sides kind of bullshitting about it. I mean, the Ukrainians have their stories that have been disproven. Like the nuclear facility attack, which wasn't really attacked,
and also the Ukrainian Ukrainian soldier girl, whatever.
Goes to Kyiv.
No, I did kind of think about this for a second. How it showed the two guys with the cardboard guns, and it's saying people picking up arms to fight. Where I can explain that from the way I see it is, they're not training with real rifles. That looks like they were doing training exercises, and there was nothing to really dispute that claim.
Oh, I can completely because since I was following it for the 2 weeks before the actual invasion, I had seen a video where it was talking about them training the citizens in the eastern areas in case of an invasion, and they used that exact picture, the video that picture came from, and that was that was 2 weeks before. So
it's very much reminded me of AOC when she took pictures of that fence, trying to say she was at the border, but it was a parking lot.
Yeah.
It's very much just false propaganda, which I can't fault them for. False propaganda has been used since before World War One. I mean, since as long as human and mankind has been fighting wars, psyching out your enemy is one of the first few stages, demoralizing them, making them think that the battle's lost, or dehumanizing your enemy. Can't exactly fault them for it, but it's to a point to where now, because of technology and because of how advanced we've gotten along with just general research, we can actually figure out most of that propaganda is just fake going on.
Oh,
I mean, when I saw the Ghost of Kiev and everybody's just immediately blowing up Facebook with it, immediately blowing up on the news about, the Ghost of Kiev and how amazing Ukraine's doing, it literally made me think of like a game of poker, how somebody's giving an obvious tell in a big bet, and they're putting like a good chunk of the ante up, but you can read them like an open book.
Yeah. Well, like the picture with the wooden rifles, I put that more on just laziness of the journalists, where they're looking for a photo of the Ukraine conflict, and they see that one and just go, oh, that one's useful, but they don't actually look at the metadata, be like, oh, that's from weeks prior when they were training.
Yeah. They're just trying to get something that probably they're being pressured to put forth the message.
Yeah, or they're just like, hey,
find something that works.
Hey, we need a picture for this topic. Here's this. It's like that.
You definitely bring up a good point, because especially with today's technology, when people just hear a story, just some random Joe could put together, what they combined the Ghost of Kiev, and they used a YouTuber's face, and they said this was the Ghost of Kiev, and they made a story about it. So I'm not going to 100% discount that there was not a fighter pilot, an ace fighter pilot in the Ukraine, fighting against the Russians. That's plausible.
Oh, no, absolutely not. Yeah, there's videos of them flying over, of Kiev, of that fighter. That's where they got the pictures from. There are pilots over there doing the job.
Some of those were from DCS.
So DCS, what's the acronym for that?
What was it?
It's on Steam. It's the flight combat simulator. I forget what the
Oh yeah,
I've
I
seen
heard
those
about
too.
that.
Yeah, I love. There was this one video my buddy shared, and I had a blonde moment where I didn't understand who he was. Like I kind of misinterpreted. My buddy shared a video saying that Soviet aircraft destroy a suburbs, and it's a clip from like Arma 3 of an A-10 Warthog, like an obvious Warthog, decimating some computer generated like building, right? And people were like commenting below it. They're like, "Oh my God, pray for citizens, peace on earth, yada yada." Blah. And I immediately hit him up. I was like, "Dude, that's fucking Armor 3." He's like, "Dude, I know, man. Just keep it quiet." But it just blows my mind how like again this backdrops on the education and the general mindset of the American people.
Well,
Of the fact of what you're saying, DeLong, is that people believe everything at face value rather than taking a step back and thinking on it and actually analyzing something. And it literally takes like 100 people will all believe that video, but it just takes that one average Joe, right? Used to train us guys. You have 10 dudes have a bad idea, but it takes that one dude to point it out and say it's a bad idea before everybody realizes it. It's kind of that same thing.
well, when it comes to disinformation, and because of the fact that I'm about to be studying this, so I've been looking into it more and more, especially with today's technology and everything. Part of it also is they're able to flood us with just so much information that we almost don't even have the time to sort through it and figure out what is the fact, what's not.
Well, we also got to be careful with using the term disinformation and misinformation, because I mean, YouTube, big tech, etc. We're all canceling demonetizing people for things they would claim as disinformation or misinformation, which later come out to be true. I mean, just Rachel Maddow on CNN was out quoting that. If you get the vaccine, you can't spread it. Once you get it, it's done. You don't have to worry about it and everything else. And that was the correct information at the time. And anyone that said otherwise, they would, silence. They ban their accounts. They, demonetize whatever, deplatform them. And now it comes out that the once disinformation / misinformation comes to be the actual truth. And I think that should be worrisome to be claiming things are disinformation or misinformation.
Absolutely. Like, I think some of it's also because of the fact that, again, with technology and just the day and age of everything being immediately at our fingertips, is everyone wants to be the expert right off the bat. And anything that goes against what they believe at that time, they ignore until it becomes irrefutable.
Right. They ignore it until it interferes with them personally.
Yeah.
Like basically. Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. It's just that one thing that I've noticed in life is perception is reality. And even someone watching the same video or experiencing one thing, they will have a completely different story than another. You'll have, like in Iraq, you'll have someone who you ask them, well, how was Iraq? How was the battle for Ramadi? Or something like that, just, personal experience. And you'll ask some guys, it's like, yeah, it sucked. We got bombed here and there. We we took some contact. It was pretty heavy, but that was it. Another person's telling the same story will tell you how he killed 50 billion people with with his toenail. They'll just exaggerate his story and tell something completely different. Or another person who will say it was the worst thing in his life. He hated it. He wishes no one to go through it. And with that is every story has different perceptions. So the Ukrainians, they could see one Russian killing a civilian for whatever reason. If you ask the civilian, they'll say they're just murdering civilians left and right, and it's they're trying to commit genocide. If you ask the Russian soldier, they'll say, maybe accurately in their perception, that they came at them in an aggressive manner and had to take action. So it's very hard, even when you're on the ground, to get reality and truth, because truth in essence can differ to each individual.
Yeah. And one of the worst things is, and all three of us are susceptible to it too, is we're observing it from the outside, so we don't have all the facts, we don't have all the details of the whole event, so nothing we say can be taken as gospel, because we don't know. We're just taking it from what we can observe from videos, messages, and whatnot.
Which, and to a point, isn't exactly our fault. Again, it is a conflict that does not directly affect us just yet. The aftermath, the repercussions, or more or less the ripples in the lake of this giant rock they're tossing into it, hasn't exactly affected us. I'd say the only thing is just our economy, but that's more or less internal choices. So I got a question. So DeLong, for anyone who would listen into this podcast at some point, once we start uploading them to the channel and people are able to listen back to this conversation, if you had any general advice for anyone out there who's actually trying to stay afloat amidst all of the misinformation that is being given to us through social media outlets and even the news outlets, what direction would you advise them to go to, and what sources would you recommend that they look into?
Well, honestly, in today's days, the only one you can take care of is yourself. That means you yourself should be prepared for anything. Make sure, at the very least, you should have a firearm. At least you have, food and resources. If things go out and things get real bad, be prepared. I mean, it doesn't take too much to have a go bag and a fallback plan. It also doesn't take much to be a part of your community. Being part of your community in the sense that you have connections, like-minded individuals, people where if shit hit the fan, you can connect with and either defend your home and that's kind of an extreme. I don't think that's going to happen to us, but say if gas prices got too much, you lost your job, etc., if you know someone who works a farm, or you could work doing something similar to that, it'll help you keep afloat in the extreme cases. And then worst cases, you're just prepared. It's kind of like the old phrase of you don't need a gun until you do.
And when you do, you'd rather have one than not need it than not have one and need it.
Yeah, I mean, I do not see any. I don't see this hitting an all-out war. I don't think China wants that. I don't think Russia wants that. Russia wants its peace that it's laid claim to, but I think Putin kind of sees that he took a little bit more than he could chew, and I don't see this going past Ukraine, and I think they'll probably. Okay, so real quick on that, I think he believed he could just go in real quick, overthrow their government, put in his puppet, and be done with it. And now he's seeing that's not the case, and the rest of the world's smart enough not to go to war, and he's kind of called them on that bluff. And he didn't expect, though, for them to take as big of sanctions, doing no-fly zones, hurting his economy as bad as he did. And there's so much more opposition by the Ukrainian people, and due to that, I think he'll probably come to peace with the Ukrainian government after putting either, how do I say this, ensuring that they're under his control by proxy, or laying more claim to Ukraine and then leaving the other half autonomous. So I don't think it's going to go much past that.
Just a quick objective claim. Once he has it, or has his enough of what he believes he can take and hold, he'll call it a day. It's a good estimate. It's a good idea. I mean, honestly, I definitely agree with that. It does bring up the question of wondering, did he plan, did he think out, or did he plan that there would be this much repercussion, especially in the United States, where we have active truckers as well as dockyard loaders. I've noticed this on the news. I don't know if it's actually true or not, but like on some of the ports on the West Coast, there are dock workers who are refusing to unload Russian containers and Russian shipping.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely getting a lot more kickback than he originally thought. But I truly, truly, truly believe that he's just going to try and put up a puppet government. His idea was to put a annex more of Ukraine, and then put up a puppet government that was pro-Russian, and kind of like how we did in Afghanistan. And he's done this before. When we declared the war on terror, and that justified the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, when he invaded Crimea, he straight up claimed that he was just fighting the war on terrorism and they were terrorists. So I think he wants just to set up a puppet government and have their compliance and have them stray away from NATO and the EU.
I'm almost more surprised that he didn't try to do the puppet government first.
Well, I mean, that was his goal, but he wasn't able to take over their capital as fast as he thought he could.
Well, I mean, like, I'm surprised he didn't do a more he didn't try to use active measures and everything to create a internal campaign within Ukraine to call for a recall election on Zelensky.
Well, you're tracking their previous president, right? How he was pro-Russian. He played both sides, but when they had the chance to join NATO and they had a chance to go for the EU, that president declined. He chose not to join NATO and chose not to join the EU, and because of that, the people went against him. Did a bunch of protests and kicked him out of office, and he fled to Russia. I think it's because he tried that in the past and it didn't work. He saw a new opportunity to do so.
That makes sense.
It does. Honestly, taking a second and sitting back on it, yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. This is why I fully support having more of our guys, especially you, Delong, on this shit, to bring more opinions to light outside of our general scope of knowledge. Because you're definitely getting into your secret squirrel shit.
That's just my obsession of history and politics.
Like, I knew about the former president, but I didn't really think of him as being that push for a puppet government, just because it had been quite a while ago. But
now, one thing that I'm kind of curious in Ukraine is because most people have that goldfish memory, is Hunter Biden and the
Burisma
secrets. Well, no, Hunter Biden's. You know how he got caught having dealings in Ukraine.
Yeah, that with Burisma. That's the company.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I thought you said charisma. My bad.
No,
but but
you can't have charisma when you're high on meth.
I don't know if you rolled high enough.
Yeah,
Rolling an 8-ball is.
We definitely need more investigation into what those dealings in Ukraine were, what they were, because I mean that involved the Chinese, that involved obviously some personnel in Ukraine. Don't know if they were pro-Russian or not, and I'm very curious to see what findings would come if there was actually a legitimate investigation into it.
Even by the time a legitimate investigation would come along, the evidence would be long burned and buried, especially by the sources and powers that be.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you heard about Mayor Giuliani when he got raided by the FBI. He said he was trying to give them the evidence from Hunter Biden, but the FBI was refusing to take that, even though they were trying to take everything else. So
yes.
I don't want to go into the realm of conspiracy. I like to go off just straight facts and facts, but in history that's generally accepted. And with that, you have to have conspiracies because they're not divulging the truth and they're not willing to investigate like they should. I mean, in all honesty, the pedophilia alone from Hunter Biden should have him in jail.
It makes you wonder what kind of back dealings that they have to be able to write themselves off on it. Conspiracies, in my mind, are necessary because truly, if you actually think about what a conspiracy is, all it is literally what you would call an independent thinker thinking somewhere in another spectrum. I wouldn't say thinking outside the box, like thinking somewhere outside the spectrum, a possibility that seems crazy, but in a weird, like in a small fraction makes sense, which would drive normal people insane. So the idea that the first oldest conspiracy was the Illuminati, that there was this central government running everything, that they had dirt on everybody. They made the decisions. The Rothschilds funded World War II and further wars. The fact that came true, that the Illuminati is real, but they're not who we think they are. That all this power that they're having isn't more or less for the original plan of, like a game of chess. It was all just for pedophilia. All of their power and all their greed was just to get away with one of the worst crimes ever, just to get away with it.
So, obviously, because we want to see this channel succeed, I won't go into too much detail on it.
Right,
but the one thing I've always disliked is the phrase, where they'll just mention the groups, like they'll say Illuminati, or they'll say, well, who the global elites, the powers that be. And with that, you're not dropping names, because actually when you do drop names, you can, that's when you actually get shut down. But
right,
straying away from saying they and them, and the old phrase of follow the money goes into play. And I don't know how familiar you guys are. The investor group of BlackRock, which is huge, huge into funding a lot of these global elites or these global missions. And when you mention, well, the global elites push for the Great Reset, where we'll own nothing and be happy according to them. But it's like, well, who are they? Okay, this is Klaus Schwab. This is his director. This is the fund. You could follow the money and see exactly who it is. And when you follow the money and see exactly who it is, it turns conspiracy into reality, because you see what's happening, who's making the profit and who's gaining power from it. A lot of them hide behind you have shell companies, you have investor groups, because people will blame the CEO. That's easy, like, oh, he's the CEO, but they don't realize there's still a board, and the people on that board are the actual people in charge, not the CEO, not the main agents. There's more behind that.
right. No, it's definitely an excellent point. I picked up a little bit what you were saying there, and going forward, I'll keep that in mind to ensure the success of our channel.
Yeah, like I said, when you start dropping names, it's now Klaus Schwab that's pretty safe. I mean, it's becoming, because he's so blatant with it. He's so Putin's blatant with his. So those are safe to say. But for anyone who actually wants to truth seek,
in a way of dropping names, you drop names with truth. You actually have a reference for it. Mine is more or less going back into old documents that I won't get too much into it. I'm not going to eat up any more time because it's already been a little bit over an hour, and I'm sure your girls are probably starving.
Yeah.
But no, I'm definitely taking your words, and definitely use wisdom from now on before dropping names.
Well, it's good. That's a good starting point for people to start realizing that those organizations do exist. Yes, the Illuminati exists. Yes, global elites are real, but that is still almost a smoke and mirrors, because it's they don't go past, like, well, who exactly is it, and what is their positions in power? Like, what control do they really have, and what are their connections? Because one thing that I was surprised was Tulsi Gabbard is actually a part of the Young Global Leaders, and so you see her going against a lot of the leftist narrative for a push, or for not going against. Sorry, let me rephrase that. You see Tulsi Gabbard going against the support for Ukraine and wanting to be more of an isolationist. Now, my concern is her being part of the Young Global Leaders and everything else. What is her agenda? And I used to love Tulsi Gabbard until I started digging deeper into her connections.
It could be, just hear me out, just an idea to wonder about what her position is. It could just be for disinformation. Not misinformation, but to be that outlier. While everybody else is saying this, they may have told her, now we want you to say differently. So that way there's always the difference of opinion, that there's always the conflict, the never knowing who's right, who's wrong.
Very true, and that's I mean, major tactic is, you distract the populace, so you distract and divide the populace. If you do so, you can control them. That's why I think a lot of this media into Ukraine. Yes, yes, Ukraine is getting invaded. We know that. I actually know people there. I know people who are trying to who are part of the resistance in Ukraine. So that is true that Russia invaded Ukraine. Why do we care so much, or why are they making such a big scene of it, is another question, because the Democrats have recently put out that they're blaming the invasion of Ukraine for the astronomical inflation we have here, for the rising gas prices, etc. Russia only gives 10% of its oil to the U.S. Gas prices have rose well over 30% since the Ukraine invasion. So if a 10% decrease results in a 30% cost hike, what else is going to play there?
Does bring up some major concerns.
Oh,
I would say you're being uncharacteristically quiet, but normally you are the back voice of conversations. So would you like to shed some light on that?
when it comes to global economy, there's so many factors. Because I don't even think 10% of our import of oil is Russian oil. I think it's actually less than that. But with the sanctions and everything, because quite a bit of the world is sanctioning Russia and potentially banning oil imports. Besides, even some countries in Europe have decided to do that. That effect, Russia now is no longer exporting that oil, which means the Middle East has to increase production and everything. So the price is going to fluctuate much more than we expect, just because of all those factors. But
it is a solid question.
It is.
Why would a 10% decrease make a 30% raise? If we have our own oil reserves, like the whole point of the Keystone Pipeline was to make us more self-reliant. It does bring it to the factor of, okay, if Russia doesn't give us that much oil and gas in the first place, then what is the cause of this influx on gas tax?
Yeah. Well, just for simplicity's sake, I don't know the exact number of how much we import from Russia, but let's just say we import 10% from Russia. Well, with us banning that import, we now have to find that 10% elsewhere. So say we turn to Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. And say that 10% is 100 million barrels. That's 100 million barrels that the Middle East might not have available due to their production rate at the moment. So they're going to charge us more to increase their production to meet that quantity. And so that 30% increase could potentially be because the Middle East is now charging us a 20% hike on what we need, and then the transportation cost goes up a bit more because there's more transport being transported. Like it would,
even if they did it 20% more, that still doesn't. That's 20% of 10%. That's 12%. That's still way off on the amount raised.
well, it also depends on how much we're paying Russia versus the Middle East too, which I think is unified because isn't Russia part of OPEC? Or is OPEC solely the Middle East?
OPEC used to be British Petroleum, and from what I understood is I can't remember if the board members on OPEC are still part of the UK, but I know that it was not a Russian company previously.
Okay, no. OPEC current members are Algeria, Angola, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Libya, Nigeria, Republic of Congo, Saudi Arabia, and UAE and Venezuela.
Yes, but the company was UK from British Petroleum.
Yeah, but they separated. OPEC is now just a governmental entity. But so that also becomes a thing: is what if the 10% of oil we're buying from Russia is considerably cheaper than what we're buying from OPEC? Who knows? That might make a difference. Like, it's definitely something that would have to be researched.
You definitely, yeah.
And I'm not an economist, and I'm not a financial guy, so trying to track all those numbers would be a nightmare.
Strange times we're living in, boys.
Yeah.
Well, I think at this point, it's kind of like you said, for the most part, Delong. It's not to immediately jump to conclusions of information that is given to us, but to wait, sit back, research it, but also trust yourself in discerning it. Right?
Correct. I mean, it's just one of those times where, like we've all agreed on. I mean, this could be distraction. This could be something more to just Ukraine versus Russia. It could be smoke and mirrors. It could be trying to dissuade from the last 2 years what people have gone under. It could be part of the World Economics Forum's plan. I mean, they claim to have control in most governments. It could be Illuminati, pushing for one world government. This could be just another step towards it. I mean, they've gained a lot of ground. The powers that be gained a lot of ground in controlling the populace and seeing how far they can go. I mean, if you think about it, they've made it acceptable to try and force a population to inject a chemical into their body against their will, close down businesses, force children to wear masks and everything else. And they can do that today. They've done that for 2 years, something that people would think that would be tyrannical.
Impossible 10 years ago. Yeah, 10 years ago, that would have been unfucking thinkable. 10 years ago, if the government came down and said, hey, everybody's got to wear masks and do this, it'd be a completely different mindset at the time. But we've gotten to the point to where gradually, and it's very smart, like it's scary smart, with the desensitizing of our general populace to where if it doesn't immediately affect them, they have no personal they don't want to put their hand into it. And weirdly, God, it's there's just something I can't name it off the top of my head, but there is something there that is causing people to become, like you said, mass psychosis, to just become like drones where they're more accepting of things. Like, okay, so biggest example of mass psychosis that I've seen so far of just people being drones. Recently, let's see, it was 2019 going into 2020. I worked at UPS when I got back from Afghanistan. I worked at UPS for a short bit of time just to make some decent cash on the side before I went on my next contract. One of the things I noticed about our current generation of just people and their general thinking is that they're more susceptible to just to do what they're told, just to pass it off instead of causing trouble. And one of the reasons I bring this up is because when I was in this class, like when you go to any job, there's always like a class, like a training week, to learn about what your job entails. And this part of this was talking about unions. And so that day they brought in a union rep to talk to all of us and all these kids who are going to be working on the ramps and the docks of the planes, because here in Louisville we have the UPS hub. Like, we got the world hub right here in Louisville, so it takes up a majority of the city. And so this big union comes in. They start talking about the plan. They start talking about here's retirement, here's pension, here's this and this. They're just coming up with all this stuff. And while I'm listening to it, I'm just picking up on the small little tidbits, because coming from outside the United States, especially in Afghanistan, we've all kind of gotten used to hearing their pyramid schemes and all these bullshit, especially me when I was in Bulgaria, hearing gypsies come up with these, in a weird way, these hacks, so to speak, to get rich quick ideas. Mm-hmm. So one of the biggest things that this pension program talked about was, if you donate, $50 of your paycheck, every 2 weeks or so, you get $50 or $100 or something like that towards your retirement every year. So when you retire in 20 years, you get a $2,000 paycheck from the union, right? And this is before UPS even allows you to be a full-time employee. Like, I'm telling you, it's slave driving here. Like, it's fucking terrible for these kids. So basically, long story short, when I was listening to the union brief, there wasn't a whole lot of benefits for us. It was more paying into this union and doing your time and waiting till you're quote unquote a senior. Then you'll get your benefits. But you have to pay into this union a whole lot of your money, in which these kids are only making, like, at the time, it was like $15 an hour. So they work 8 hours a day. And they do that for 4 or 5 days. And at the end of the week, they wanted to give them $50 of that. So it's just this bullshit scheme of keeping these kids poor. So my point being is that when they came out and they gave this plan for the union, they slapped down all these forms in front of us. And before even asking anybody if they wanted to, they just started saying, so go ahead, take your pen, and start filling out the form in front of you. Just go ahead and start filling in your name, your information, your social, your bank account. I didn't do a fucking thing of this because obviously I had fucking questions about it, and I wasn't going to get tied up in a fucking bullshit union, because think about unions, that's a whole other topic for another day. But my point being is that when I took a step back while in this room, all these kids started fucking filling out these forms. Not even asking any questions. Just immediately, there's like 20 kids in this room, and they start telling them what to do, and they start doing it. And it took me to literally raise my hand. And they looked at me and it's like, yes, sir, do you need a pen? I said, no, I don't. And they were like, well, what do you need? And I said, oh, I'm just asking, what's the benefit for me to sign this right now? Like, why am I doing this? And for me to ask them why stopped the whole momentum. It like broke this huge bubble of like control that they had. And all these kids stopped signing. They stopped filling out these forms, these A, B bubble forms and shit. But when I started questioning them and asking them about the true benefit of this union, because I told them, hey, what if I have insurance with this other company? I don't need you guys. Like, I'm buying into this, but I have an outsource insurance company that's looking out for me better than you would, right? And when I tried asking them all these questions, it started to open up the minds of these kids to make them not want to sign into it. But my point being is that it's a shock to me that when I got back from Afghanistan to see how the new generation is so susceptible to just to do what they're told rather than ask questions.
Oh man, you try go to a state university, spend a day in one of those liberal arts classes, and you will see that tenfold.
Hey, dude, bro, I'm going to college this fall. Like I'm applying. I'm going for electrical engineering, and I'm gonna be right there. I've still got your voice in my head telling me treat it like a job. Smoking a cigarette on Tower 6. Treat it like a job, bro. Just treat it like a job.
I think a big thing is it's this generation has the mindset of the good of the group versus the good of the individual.
Yeah.
Where
Well, that goes to virtue signaling, though.
it does, yeah. But like a lot of the people will, if it benefits them, they're happy as a byproduct of thinking of the group first.
What, that their sacrifice or them doing their part brings them satisfaction, that they're a part of a bigger whole
Yeah.
kind of deal,
And
rather than actually asking the question of, is this benefiting me at all?
yeah.
Well, see, here's a question to that though: what do they really sacrifice?
I would say time. Me personally, I would say time for that particular instance, but as a greater whole, I would say they're also sacrificing their will. Like they're sacrificing a part of themselves instead of asking the question why, instead of taking the hard road and being independent, they're sacrificing that bit of themselves to conform.
Here's the thing: a lot of people are very generous with other people's money. I mean, that's not hard to do, and that's any program, any quote unquote socialist push, whether it be welfare, et cetera, or the people who push for illegal immigration, they might sacrifice their time in saying they want it, because it gives them a positive feedback loop, because they believe if they're seen saying that or seen supporting it, then they're looked highly upon. When in reality, they're not going to be taking those people into their homes. They're not going to be donating their paycheck to the government for whatever programs it may be. They're wanting other people and other resources to have that expense. And it's very terrible, because it's not virtuous in any sense, as you are pushing it off on others.
Well, I definitely will say it is currently 11 o'clock on my time. It's roughly been about an hour and a half that we've been on this podcast. I definitely gotta say, Delong, it's awesome to have you back on here, dude. Like, I miss you. I miss hearing your voice. Like, if we do have you on this pod, what? My girlfriend heard me say that. Now she's giving me a look. Like, it's okay. It's only through the computer for now. Anyway.
That she knows her.
Yeah, right. Talk to you later, babe. But so we definitely got to have you on the podcast again, and I definitely will say the next time we have a podcast, I want to try and at least get one more of our boys from Scorpion on here, and I would say instead of fully talking politics, actually have it just be a legitimate smoke shack, cigar shack powwow, just shooting the shit.
Radio 2.0.
And
hopefully we can get it at an earlier time.
Yeah, getting it as an earlier time. I definitely will take the blame for that. I had some stuff I had to take care of today and lost complete fucking track of time. So I definitely will say next time we'll try and shoot for like daytime, early afternoon.
Yeah.
It's awesome to hear you guys, bro.
Yeah, you guys,
of course.
You guys well. Glad to hear you all doing well.
Yeah, care, dude. Yeah, hey, be safe, bro. Thank you for coming on. Hope to have you on again, brother. Talk to you later. Well, not gonna lie, I really did enjoy that conversation. I did get lost a couple times, but it's all good. Got reeled back in for a minute.
Yeah,
there's a lot to talk about. There's
absolutely.
lot to talk about of like what is going on, but it is so hard to not go on a tangent, because I think one of the biggest things that we as veterans definitely deal with on a daily basis is not really scatterbrain, but it's just we love chasing the rabbit down the hole.
Do you want to give a bit of an outro?
Yeah, absolutely. For those of you who are listening, whether now or in the future to this podcast, once we've made it big, we're millionaires sitting in our mansions and in our little studios in the basements of our soundproof booths. Wish to thank you for tuning in and listening to our banter, things to talk about, things to think about, especially because who knows, maybe the topics that we've talked about today may come to fruition later, or maybe just come to light and might become the subject of your topics.
Or they might be complete bullshit.
Or they might just be complete bullshit of just the cigar shack shenanigans while we're smoking and joking. But nonetheless, for those of you who know me, I am Rice. For those of you who don't know me, still call me Rice. G-Man, G-String, G-Money, whatever you have it. Thank you for tuning in. Have a wonderful day.
All right, everyone. That was episode 2 of Smokepit Symposium. I want to give a special thanks to our buddy Delong for hopping in extremely last minute on that. And honestly, brought a whole dimension to this podcast that I was not expecting. He knows a lot of things I don't know. I have to caveat that this podcast is just a bunch of dudes just talking. Some of what we talk about, who knows if it's real or not? Who knows if it's fake? Believe what you want to believe. We try to do our research on topics we know. Like I say earlier in the podcast, we all bring our own areas of expertise. We're not all perfect. We're still human. With that said, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you come around for the next episode. Check out some of the other Video Session Tactical puts out. Schedules in the works. There's a lot of moving parts behind the scenes, but videos will be coming. So if you like the podcast, drop a subscription so you know when the next one comes out. If you liked it, leave a like. We do have a Patreon, patreon.com/Hessian Tactical. I'll leave the link in the description. With that being said, thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay secure. If not, do what you need to.